sometimes a film appears to be one thing, and it just is. And that's actually not a bad thing in this case. This is the adventure film called Valley of the Kings from 1954 with Robert Taylor and Eleanor Parker, who did a wonderful job. Can be really short about that. They did a very solid job. The Robert Taylor is always very steady kind of actor, pretty much indestructible. Almost, I've only ever seen him as the hero, so yeah, and he is the hero again here. And Eleanor Parker, I've seen her a couple of times, and she's also solid, and everybody else on the cast are all names I've never heard of, but everybody's pretty good, which is what you need for an adventure film. Which completely surprises me when you go read the Wikipedia page that belongs to this movie, because the way this thing was filmed, and then when you go to the page, the plot part is like one paragraph, and then how this thing was filmed is like 7 paragraphs, because stuff went ridiculously wrong. And Eleanor Parker has said some things about it where basically the director had no idea what he was doing, also didn't actually pay people, so there was a walkout at some point, which was money arrived and then walkout ended. But there was the director didn't know how to direct, so the assistant director or the director of photography actually did the directing. So I'm gonna try and find the name of this other guy and put it up here because he's the real director. And the circumstances in Egypt were atrocious, like lavatories, not really. Which in 1954, yeah, upsetting. But you do not see any of that in the film at all. And this director, who is this guy, the official director, he's also the writer. And his script is actually pretty good. It is an adventure film, so don't expect like political blah or anything like that, or don't expect Shakespeare. But it's fit for purpose. It has a pace, and between the cinematographer and probably the editor and the actors and the locations, I'm going to come back to locations in a second, this is a pretty solid work. So the problems that they had on sets, you don't see it at all. And the positive things about this film are the location, which was Egypt in 1954, and they had permission to film in the actual places you want to film it, in the Valley of the Kings, at a dig site. And they actually filmed at Abu Simbel. And Abu Simbel, the complex, is now situated somewhere else, but in 54 it was where it was for 3,000 years. So they had it in situ. Big complex of the statues, and they are actually allowed to go on it. I think it's actually the stunt doubles that are actually allowed to go on it, and I think some of the close-ups are studio recordings back in California. But it's seamless. You don't notice unless you know, okay, this is probably how they filmed it. You don't notice, and they are walking all over this monument. And it's awesome. And they're walking between in temple complexes in Luxor and around the pyramids and the Valley of the Kings, the dig sites. Awesome. One of the reasons to watch this movie is if you like ancient Egypt, because of what you can see here, just the vistas. Worth it. I have to say that my print that I was looking at was not the greatest. Try to get a better print. I think I probably got it was actually Spanish DVD, an older Spanish DVD. So try to get a better print and it will be awesome. The other things that was awesome was that the story is actually set in 1900. And in 1954, Egypt and 1900, it's not that different in peoples, and so a lot of local peoples are in it. And one of the things you noticed almost immediately at that very first dig site, everybody is singing while they work. And they keep going. For every work site they go, they're singing while they work. And when they're not singing while they work, they're singing while they're having dinner or sitting by the campfire. They're doing a lot of culture. And I think that is probably correct. And maybe even correct for ancient Egypt. The way they built the pyramids would also have been a people who were singing while they're working, you know? Because that's how you can get more work done. That's surprising and interesting to see. I think they were actually in that first opening scene where she comes onto his dig site. I think that's a real dig site. That looked as real as it gets. And it's either a real dig site or definitely people who know how to do dig sites like that have set that up. The one of the last scenes of the film is where they actually get into a tomb, and they do some jiggery pokery with the first. They discover a wall because they're supposed to discover the tomb. They discover a wall, and then a moment later there's a whole scaffolding and a door, a wooden door. And I think they're actually going into an existing tomb. I don't know which one it is because I'm not that well versed in which tomb is which, and I'm sure it's known which one it is. The wiki didn't say. Wiki is actually pretty short except about a big mess. But that was very interesting. It's 1900s, and that's an interesting choice to pick for a date for this story. Because in the 19th century, the way people were in Egypt were looking for treasure. People were treasure hunters, and then slowly people started to discover, okay, it's worth more maybe than just to get your golden object if you also know where was the golden object and how does it relate to anything else. And so archaeology is starting to come in, and this 1900 is on the cusp of, okay, we want the looting to stop, we want people to do actual archaeology. You have a question, and then you give the stuff to the Egyptian government, which wasn't actually in 1900. They were still in the middle of an Ottoman Empire and an English occupation. It was complicated. But pretty soon after, like the tomb of Tutankhamun, which was discovered in 1921, off the top of my head, all of that became part of the Egyptian government. Because, yeah, that's the only way to keep the stuff in country. Otherwise, it just goes everywhere. And so the story is about people selling artifacts and where do they come from. And then this young lady comes onto this gentleman's dig site and she says, well, my father was a big, important archaeologist, an actual archaeologist, not a looter. And he had a couple of questions he wanted answering, but he's not here anymore, so I want to answer those questions. And her questions are of a subtype of archaeology that also goes on, which is trying to connect one part of history to another part of history. And her part of history she wants to connect is parts of the Bible. She wants to find Joseph in the 18th dynasty Egypt, and she has a lead and she would like to follow that. So she's not there to loot, she's not there to grab monies and stuff like that. And is he interested in helping her out with that? And then he says, well, I actually knew your father, and yes, I would be interested that now that I know that you're not interested in looting. And so they go on an adventure together, and that's what the story is about. and all the looters they run into, and the locals, so many locals. And one of the local things they run into is people who are Islamitic, but also the Coptic Church. One of the things that, because looking for Joseph, you're going to run into Coptic people. An old Coptic priest actually comes to look for her and says, "Oh, well, I knew your father, and he said he wanted to come to our monastery because he wanted to look at something, but then he never did. Would you like to come?" And I like the film, the story for letting the adventure just happen, because they actually have no clue where to start with the Joseph stuff. So this guy is as good as any, so they go to that place and then they get a clue and they go through all of that in a quite natural way. So if this film is not in any way contrived, I enjoyed it very much for the fact that it is not in any way surprising or nothing unexpected happens. I was talking to the peanut gallery while I was watching the movie. She said, "How are you do? What have you planned?" And I said, "Okay, I'm in the middle of I'm about a third into this movie," and I said it's going to be a real short review because I don't expect anything unexpected, and at the end there wasn't anything unexpected, but it's not in a bad way, it's in a good way. This an adventure movie that is just that, with the added ancient Egypt stuff in it, is enough. It's enough. It's not very long. It's about an hour and 24 minutes, 26 minutes, and that's also perfect. It's the perfect length. It doesn't need to be any longer than that. It was good. The thing about putting it in 1900 is that you have to. The gentlemen all have suits, and that's in 54 or 1900. It doesn't really matter that much. But the ladies, they wear something different, and so she is wearing a 1900 dress, a couple of them. And the only thing that is strange is that very last scene when they visit that tomb, she's wearing a 1954 skirt and blouse. And I was thinking about it, and I think maybe because I think they're actually in a tomb, in an actual Egyptian tomb, that maybe the people who are in charge of that didn't want her in the big skirt 1900 skirts in there, so they wanted her in a shorter skirt, so they gave it up. It's fine. And when she's riding the camel, she's wearing trousers, because again you have a similar problem, because there's also a windstorm and the stuff blows everywhere, and the her skirts would blow everywhere. So she's wearing trousers. But I don't know, in 1900 she might have actually worn something of the sort, because in 1900 the ladies who went cycling would wear cycling breeches, and I think maybe when you were riding, there would have been riding garb as well. But I know about the cycling, definitely. I'll have a picture of that, because you cannot go cycling in long skirts. Not like that. You're going to get your skirts in the spokes and you're going to be tumbling down. So you're wearing special breeches for that. I don't think it matters very much. It is an adventure, and the time is kind of more interesting for people who know something about history, but it's not that important. Last thing I could talk about, why does a film like this exist at all? In 1954, Robert Taylor is actually there because he was the third person after. That is very normal in films, that you look at the Wikipedia and it turns out that like 5 other people were considered for the part, but they were. Stuff happened, and then you get Robert Taylor. No complaints about Robert Taylor. And but he's always been the hero, adventure hero. Like in Quo Vadis, he was adventure hero, and so seeing him here, I'm not surprised at all. Seeing the Joseph connection here, I'm not surprised at all. That's also again a sign of the times. The Egyptian stuff is actually there because there was a book. And the film company actually did buy the rights to the book, but the book is actually not an adventure story. It is a non-fiction. It is just about how these things work. And still the film company decided to buy the rights for quite a bit of money, so the author must have been very happy. And I think they actually took a lot from that book, because everything that I could see was, I mean, apart from the Joseph stuff, but this Joseph stuff was hypothetical anyway. It was all correct, and the locations are correct, so you cannot be wrong with that, you know. I think this is the right way to do it, and I enjoyed this movie for what it is. I enjoyed it very much. So
maybe the Joseph stuff was added to comply with the Hays Code.
And maybe, or just give it a pivotal towards the...
She needs to have motivation too.
Yeah, but also us, the viewer, has to have motivation to be watching this. And so having Joseph as a recognizable name, because Ra Hotep, the guy they were looking for, who is he? I mean, Ramses they understand, but they know they're not going to be looking for Ramses, because all of those tombs are already long since found. You're looking for somebody who people don't know much about, and therefore you come with a Ra Hotep, and who the hell is Ra Hotep? But Joseph at least makes some sort of, you know who he is. And then this Ra Hotep, for the people who know their Bible stories, when Joseph came to Egypt, he would have talked to a Egyptian who is, I believe, unnamed in the Bible. But the Ra Hotep is perfectly possible. And if this Ra Hotep was converted by Joseph, then in this Ra Hotep's tomb there would be something on a wall about that, or maybe a written thing, something. And that's what they were looking for. So when archaeologists have an idea of something happened, but they have no proof for it, they start looking for, oh, could it be in this place? And the trick is to find a proof, and the best trick is to find like several proofs from several different sources. Sometimes you only get one proof, and then you sort of go, it is possible. It is more annoying when you get nothing, because then you have a negative, you know. And so they do leave it somewhat open. They give it some conclusion, because it's just an adventure movie. and a conclusion is fine. They give it a conclusion without actually annoying archaeologists, I think. It's obvious that what they added was obviously added. So... Anyway, I like this movie very much. The acting was good enough. And I'm sorry they went for so much trouble. But there's no way... You can't see it. And it's nice. I enjoyed it. And that's my opinion. And I'm sticking to it.